Good evening, and thank you for watching. My name is Hank Stevenson. I'm the co-founder of the Arizona Agenda, a subscription newsletter covering Arizona politics. I'm moderating this evening's debate between the Senate candidates in Legislative District 10, which spans from Eastern Mesa to Apache Junction. The Citizens Clean Election Commission is the sponsor of this event. As the state's voter education agency, Clean Elections hosts debates, so voters have the opportunity to hear directly from the candidates, ask questions on the issues that matter most to them, and vote informed. Candidates that have a contested primary election have been invited to participate in the debate. Candidates that have opted into the Clean Elections Clean Funding Program are required to participate, while traditional candidates are invited and encouraged to attend. Please note, only candidates for the state Senate and LD10 are participating in tonight's GOP primary debates. When voting in a primary election, voters are choosing between candidates of the same political party, so their preferred nominee may advance to the general election. As a moderator, I will ensure candidates have the opportunity to engage directly with their respective opponents. The questions that will be asked this evening are coming directly from the voters. Leading up to debates, Clean Elections conducted outreach to voters across the state asking for questions for the candidates. Additionally, Clean Elections surveyed voters to learn what issues are important to them. This survey data, along with input from the experienced journalists at the Arizona Agenda, the Arizona Capital Times, and the Green Valley News, have been utilized to guide the discussion so it best serves voters. Of course, we want to hear directly from you, dear voter. So voters that are watching this debate live, you can submit questions at any time. To do that, email debates@kc-a.com, or you can text them in 480-808-1814, or you can call them in 480-937-1253. I'll try to repeat this a few times throughout the debate if you missed it. Please specify if your question is for a specific candidate or for both of the candidates. We screen questions for clarity to eliminate duplication, speeches, or personal attacks. This debate is scheduled for about an hour, so we may not get to all audience questions, but we'll do our best. Candidates, you will have 1 minute for your opening and closing statements and 1 to 2 minutes for responses to voter questions. We encourage an exchange of dialogue between opponents. If you feel the need to respond to another candidate's comments, you may do so. I may limit responses for time management purposes, and we remind the candidates and the audience that this is a respectful, courteous, and professional environment. Our goal tonight is to connect candidates and voters so the electorate may vote informed. Our LD10 Republican candidates for the state Senate are Rusty Bowers, who was first elected in 1992 and served until 2001. He returned to the Capitol in 2015 and is the current Speaker of the House. And David Farnsworth, a former state senator who was first elected to the state house in 1994. He was appointed to the Senate in 2013 and served until 2021. We'll go in alphabetical order for opening comments. So Mr. Bowers, if you will please take us off. You're muted.
Unmute. Okay. I probably sound better muted. Thank you very much for the opportunity to spend some time with you. My name is Rusty Bowers, and I'm a candidate for the Senate in District 10 in the state of Arizona. And I have the pleasure of being part of a great district, that much of which I've known for 45 years of my life. I am a conservative. I believe in family and a strong family. I've got wife of 48 years, 6 living children, 20 grandkids. I have a great investment in Arizona, and I want to make sure that what I leave behind is better than what I left, or what I might take with. So I'm grateful to be here, and I look forward to a good exchange.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senator Farnsworth, your turn.
Thank you, Hank. My name is David Farnsworth. I grew up in Mesa, also, third generation. My parents and grandparents all lived in Mesa. I'm married with children. I will tease Rusty in saying that I have 31 grandchildren, and children are a precious commodity, and we all have interest in the future for that and other reasons. I also am running for the state senate in LD10. I think LD10 is a wonderful district. It brought Mesa together more than the LD16 that I was in prior to that. I believe in traditional families. I'm pro-life, very excited about the Supreme Court decision overturning Roe versus Wade. I believe that is the most important decision the Supreme Court has made in our lifetimes. I'm very happy about that. I am pro-Second Amendment, pro-school choice. I was in the legislature for 9 years. I was content with my retirement. Then I started getting phone calls that I needed to run again. And I said no in the beginning, but I got my arm twisted by a number of people. I was called to duty, said it was my responsibility. And when my dear wife, Robin, encouraged me, I gave in and agreed to it. I will stop at that. Looking forward to a good discussion here.
Thank you, gentlemen. So let's dive right into it. The hot topic of election integrity in the 2020 election. Speaker Bowers, you're among the most outspoken Republicans in your belief that there was not fraud in the 2020 election, at least not fraud sufficient to sway the election results. And you stood up to the former president when he urged you to declare otherwise. Survey after survey has shown that that is not the opinion of the majority of the Republican Party. Additionally, as Speaker of the House, you killed a host of election reform bills this year, including one to outlaw mail-in and early voting. My question is, why should Republicans support someone who disagrees with them about the 2020 election and thwarted so-called election integrity legislation?
Well, I appreciate the question. I think everybody had some feeling about the election. We're wondering. Some chose to fan the flames of doubt that were promulgated by the Trump campaign and push that to extremes. Both President Fan and I had agreed on doing an audit just for the mere fact that we wanted to reestablish trust in the voting capabilities and accuracy of Arizona, especially in Maricopa County. But they decided to go one way and I decided to go another way. And both of those directions brought us to the same conclusion. Their audit showed 111 more votes for Biden and 200 and something less votes for Trump. And ours showed that there were maybe a few vote difference, but very, very few, both with the outcome that Mr. Biden had indeed won the election. In as much as there was still a lot of discussion and wanting to make sure we could do what we needed to, I'm holding up, here's this year's bills with the check marks of all those that have passed, some 19 bills from the House and Senate, with another 19 from last year. That's some 38 bills that have been passed, have been or are soon to be signed into law by the governor after this last session, tightening up all types of election procedures, tightening up the drop box problem. And on that particular problem, the drop box a fiasco that is highlighted in a wonderful and entertaining movie. The counties of Yuma are pulling all of their drop boxes inside. Also, Tucson is as well, and there will only be one in Maricopa County outside the door of the elections department. So that problem has been solved. The situation of so-called ballot harvesting and ballot stuffing. So we hear, most people don't live in the past, but they want to make sure that in the future that their vote is counted accurately. I appreciate that. I want mine to be as well. And so we've taken a lot of steps to make sure that happens. And lots of folks have put forward those proposals, and we've seen a lot of fruit. And I know that it'll make a big difference. And I hope that folks will believe it.
Okay. Senator Farnsworth, you do believe that the 2020 election was stolen, despite the fact that no court in this nation has found credible evidence to support that assertion. My question to you is, would you overturn the results of the 2020 election if given the opportunity, and based on what evidence, if so?
You know, Hank, that is a good question, but a challenging one. It's a complex one, because in order to overturn an election, we would have to have solid evidence. Now, it is true, I believe that Trump won the election. I believe the election was stolen. Let me just share some thoughts here. And the answer to your question is, if I had sufficient evidence, I would definitely vote to overturn the election. We don't have that evidence compiled yet. I think it is available, but it takes a lot of work. And that's where I think we dropped the ball, because the legislature has the perfect opportunity to dig in and find that through public involvement. I'll finish my time by saying, you know, many people across Arizona and the United States have questioned the validity of the 2020 election in Arizona. As chairman of the Arizona Senate Government Committee, I requested permission of Senate President Karen Fann to hold hearings in my committee to respond to those concerns. It was and is my belief that the voters should be afforded the opportunity to attend formal hearings in the Arizona legislature to express their concerns, provide any evidence of election fraud that they might have, ask questions, etc. President Fann eventually responded to my request by holding some hearings in the Judicial Committee, which resulted in the Arizona Senate audit. To my knowledge, no hearings were held in the Arizona House. As you know, many people across Arizona and the US believe that the 2020 election in Arizona was stolen. A great opportunity was lost. Self-timed. A great opportunity was lost. And I believe that we could, and the key point is, in November and December of 2020, we had a great opportunity to really dig in right then in the legislature. The public could have come in and testified, and if nothing else, there would have been a great satisfaction of the people feeling that their government was listening. They feel shut out, and they feel like the investigation was impeded. And so I believe that there's information out there that needs to be heard, and certainly passions that run high. And that is exactly why I was drafted to run in this race, because people felt like it was not handled appropriately in the legislature.
Dave, you have said before that you would roll back that election. You have said that. And I'm wondering if there is some evidence in a year and a half, do you think people might have the courage to walk up and hand that to you or anybody else? I mean, why wouldn't the so-called evidence be brought forth?
Well, I appreciate you saying that, Rusty, and reminded me of that, because I have joined in every effort of people who have pushed back against this election. I have not drafted any of these letters, but I believe I've signed on to every one. It's kind of like being pro-life and pro-Second Amendment. I will vote for every pro-life bill. I will vote for every Second Amendment, pro-Second Amendment bill. And anyone that pushes back against the 2020 election, I will sign on to that, because I believe there is evidence out there, and I believe the people feel like they were shut out. I think that if you, as Speaker of the House, you had the authority to call an ad hoc committee meeting, invite the public in to testify and to question. You have staff in the legislature that are available, paid by the state. And of course, when we're not in session, they have a lot of time on their hands. And I believe that would have been an appropriate use of their time, not waiting for someone to prove. And that's not what I would do. I wouldn't wait for someone to prove to me, but I would open the door and have.
But Dave, you were a sitting senator. You're in the Senate. I'm in the House. Why wouldn't you use your influence as head of the government committee to say, we're going ahead. I'm a committee chairman. I'm going to go ahead. Is it that you felt some impediment in the Senate against getting all this information? You sat right there. You didn't get out of office until the second week in January, did you?
I did not. You're absolutely right. And I did everything I could to persuade President Fan to allow me to hold those hearings as chairman of government committee. I was passionate about that. That's why I say my repeated requests. She finally said, okay, we'll have hearings, but we're going to have them in a judiciary committee. And I said, that's fine with me as long as we have hearings. Now, was I a little hesitant? Yes, because I was holding missing children hearings once a month. And then President Fan came to me and said, we want you to shut those down because it's upsetting Kate Brophy-McGee. And so I voluntarily shut them down with the idea of when the session started, as chairman of government committee, we will start those up again and have missing children meetings. We're talking about DCS and the fact they lose 400 children a year.
Let's keep on task.
Pardon me?
Let's just keep to the point. The missing children topic.
I'm making the point because you asked if I felt an impediment, and I did, because when I came into session in the 2020 session with the idea of continuing the missing children meeting in government committee, Karen Fan shut me down as president of the Senate. And I said, Karen, as chairman of government committee, I thought I could do anything I wanted to do. And she says, you can, as long as I give you permission. So yes,
so you weren't able
president of the Senate and Speaker of the House control those houses, and a chairman may feel powerful, but in reality, at least in the opinion of Karen Fan and probably yourself, if I had been in the House and been chair of the government committee, could I have proceeded in a room in the House and conducted those hearings?
But you just said that the hearings were carried on by the Judiciary Committee in the Senate. Did the public have a chance to come in and speak before your former colleague, Mr. Farnsworth, there?
Well, a certain amount, but it was much more limited than I would have done as chairman. I would have opened it up.
You would have done it one way, and like, did the president ever tell you that there was some reason that she didn't want you to hold hearings? Was there some impediment to that? I mean, she obviously proceeded with some very important decisions.
Considering the fact that
did not spell it out.
I think the point.
Considering the fact that Mr. Farnsworth left office in January 21, I think we can let him off the hook for what he did or did not use his committee.
But this is an important contrast, Hank. Just an important contrast. You mentioned what you would have done had you been in the House. I have a question. What would you have done if President Trump had called you and asked you to throw the election and get rid of Mr. Biden? The suggestion that you get rid of Mr. Biden's electors and put in Mr. Trump's. This was right during the hot and heavy of it all. What would you have done had you been me?
That seems like a fair question.
That is a fair question. I'm glad you asked it, Rusty, because I have contemplated that a lot. You sitting in your chair getting that phone call. I believe that President Trump called you because he was frustrated. He was confident that the election had been stolen, and he saw you as probably the third most powerful person in Arizona, governor being first, president of the Senate second, Speaker of the House third, and he was pleading with you to do something that should have been done because he honestly in his heart, along with millions of Americans believed it was stolen. Now, I wouldn't expect you to go against your oath of office or anything you truly believed. However, they had a theory that the attorneys came up with, that the Arizona legislature could overturn the election. I'm not an attorney, and I don't know whether that would fly or not. But if I had been in your shoes, I believe I would have done, which is what I intend to do if I'm elected, and that is hold more hearings and invite the public in and allow people to speak and look for that evidence. And if there was sufficient evidence, then absolutely we need to decertify that election. Now, it would have to be solid evidence, and I understand you felt President Trump is a very strong personality. He expresses himself very boldly, and I can see where you might have felt intimidated. And under that basis,
No.
the way you looked at it, you turned him down, and I understand that. What should have been done is, in my opinion, as Speaker of the House, and what I will do in the future, is open it up and have more hearings until we find the truth, whether the election was stolen, or we can prove that it was not stolen, so that the people of Arizona and the people of the United States can regain their trust in our election system, which at this time they do not have.
Let me follow up there, Senator Farnsworth. You say that, eventually we're going to have the proof, or have the proof that the election was not stolen. It's virtually impossible to prove that an election was not stolen. It is very easy to come up with a new conspiracy every day to how the election could have been stolen. At what point do we say the clock has run out? There's no more time to present evidence. You've had, not you personally, but Trump and his allies have had more than 2 years. Time is flying in weird, almost 2 years to present this evidence. And we have not seen a court in this nation take up any amount of evidence that has been offered and verify it as credible. At what point do we say, for lack of evidence, the election was clean?
Well, I don't think this election is going to be overturned or decertified, because it's a very challenging thing to find sufficient evidence to convince enough people for such a significant upheaval, because it would create a real upheaval across the state, the nation, and the world, because everyone's watching. However, at what point should we quit? I think never. And I don't think it's up to Trump and his people to determine this, because I'm going to say we are lawmakers, even though at the moment I'm not in office, but I have been, and so I understand the feeling. As lawmakers, it's our responsibility. And if people do not have faith in the elections, then we have no more country. It's just like the borders. If we don't have a border, we don't have a country. And so until we can...
to other topics, but I have to follow up on this. A lot of people will say the reason that people don't have faith in our electoral system is because people keep offering conspiracies in lieu of proof that the 2020 election was stolen. At what point is this search that does not seem to ever net any real proof hurting our democracy?
Well, thank you, Hank. First of all, it's not a democracy, it's a republic. However, in answer to your question, this is an ongoing battle. Now, I'm gonna, the real foundation of my life are my religious beliefs, okay? And so when we talk about conspiracy theories, my mentor is a man by the name of Ezra Taft Benson. He was Secretary of Agriculture under Eisenhower for 8 years. And if you Google his name, you'll find him saying, I'm not talking about conspiracy theory, I'm talking about conspiracy fact. Now, in my religious beliefs, we have a book called the Book of Mormon, and Rusty is aware of that because we are both of the same religion. In the Book of Mormon, in Ether chapter 8, the synopsis of the chapter says, and this is pertinent to our discussion, Hank, it says, modern Gentiles are warned of a secret combination which seeks to destroy the freedom of all lands. And so this is much larger than just the 2020 election. This is a real conspiracy headed up by the devil himself. And this may sound crazy, I realize, to some people, but when I used to talk about 25 years ago, people would shake their head and they thought I was crazy. But nowadays, people are saying, wow, we're talking about the swamp. It's deep and it's wide and it's been going on for a long, long time. 1913 was a very bad year for the United States. In 1913, we got the 17th Amendment, which completely undid this balance between states and the federal government. We got the 16th Amendment, which gave us income tax. Two of the planks of the Communist Manifesto. Now, I won't go on and on, but does that help at all to answer your question?
Somewhat.
I mean, I can go on for a half an hour, Hank, because this is what I'm passionate about. But really,
let's move on. I got another for both of you. Same topic.
Okay, fine.
But will you accept the results? Will you commit right here to accepting the results of your own election if you lose? Shout it out.
Okay. Yes, I will.
Good. Well, that depends on, if there's evidence of fraud. That's a very good question. My wife and I were talking it over earlier this evening, and we came to the conclusion, if Rusty wins this race, I'm going to call him and congratulate him. Quite frankly, I have not contemplated a question of whether there would be voter fraud. I don't know why the powers that be, the swamp, this secret combination I was talking about, would want to reach down and choose one of us when we're both, in a lot of ways, fairly similar. And so I don't anticipate a condition where I would challenge the results of our election in LD10. I'm not going to say absolutely. I mean, if an event happened and we got all kinds of reports like they reported in the movie 2000 Mules, if I get all kinds of calls at night and said, I saw thousands of ballots dropped, but I think that's highly unlikely. And I would say it's highly likely that if I'm declared the loser and Rusty is declared the winner, I will accept that. What I will not accept is to go back to sleep and say everything's fine, because we all know there is election fraud. It's only a debate on the extent. I mean, you hear people who've moved here from Chicago, they'll tell you that it was just their common practice. Someone told me his father's job as a worker for the Democrat Party was to purchase votes. He would go out and buy votes for years and years and years. Now, I don't think that's been happening in Arizona, but from what I've heard, it's happened in Chicago and other areas for years and years. So we have to continue to work to make our elections better.
Okay, we've got a lot of other ground to cover. I appreciate you guys taking the time to talk through that. Let's talk about abortion. The U.S. Supreme Court recently struck down Roe versus Wade. In Arizona, there's some confusion about which law takes precedence, the recent ban on abortions after 15 weeks or the territorial blanket ban on abortions with the exception for saving a mother's life. My question is, in what situation, if any, do you believe abortion should be legal? And let's start with you, Speaker Bowers.
So is the question, under what condition would it be legal or illegal?
Should it be legal, I guess? In your opinion, what would qualify as an exemption to, a law against abortions?
For me, I believe that if there were a condition where a woman's life would absolutely be in jeopardy, and after consultation with the physician and their family, and it's like telling somebody they have to indulge in moral reflection. who's going to know what that means? But I would hope, and I would absolutely expect anybody in that situation would be driven to a lot of consideration and thought. And if they so decided that the life of the child could not be saved and the mother's life might be lost, or vice versa, that would be a decision they would take, and I would honor their decision. There aren't many others, even that, as far as viability with modern medical procedures. I don't see that as a lay person being a super challenge. I think those could be mostly overcome, but that would be up to them. But as for me, I look towards life. And we're an adopting family, our own family. We have our own little United Nations of kids from Africa and the Philippines and Mexico and combinations, Asian, and it's wonderful. And I would hope that as a society, we could pull together and say, okay, in our state, we may not have this legal, but what can we do to help young women? And even what can we do to help young men come to some realization of their responsibilities? And so there's so much more that is being done and can be done to ease those decisions and help them on the side of life. And that's kind of where I'd like to promote my efforts.
And let me follow up there, Mr. Speaker. Cases of rape and incest. Do you believe that abortion should be an option?
Because I've talked to people who were born as a result of rape. I've talked to a young lady who that was the case. And she was not aborted. And she, while she says, I don't know her, she didn't know her father, to my recollection, but she certainly knew her mother. And that decision was contemplated. Other types of seduction in situations where women are incapacitated and has resulted in pregnancies and children born who were very grateful to have been allowed and thank their mothers, even in horrible situations. I'm not saying, again, that it would be precluded, but that would be a case of extreme challenge to a young woman. But for me, it would have to be that her life would be in danger. But I would certainly understand in the case of a rape or incest where it was overly traumatic, I would understand it would be extremely sad. And these are extremely difficult decisions.
And Senator Farnsworth, your thoughts?
Thank you. And I think that Rusty and I agree on pretty much the subject. I take a little harder line on this. I will say about Roe v. Wade, hallelujah, as I said in my opening remarks, is the greatest decision ever made in our lifetimes by the Supreme Court. And in reference to which state, which law takes effect, from statehood, we had the law that abortion was illegal. And our Attorney General Brnovich just ruled a few days ago, if I'm not mistaken, that that law applies. And so I accepted that with, again, rejoicing, because a life of a child, I believe that it is a human being from conception, and that human being should be protected from conception. And I was elected to the legislature 26 years ago or so, the first time. And so I've had a lot of time to reflect on that question. How do you feel about abortion? And I made up my mind many years ago that I am pro-life, no exceptions, hard line, abortion is murder. Now, the reason I can say that is there are plenty of people who will defend abortion. There are plenty of people who will talk about exceptions. And I know there's some very painful circumstances that people have to go through, that they will discuss in their family and with their doctors and with their religious leaders. Very, very painful. I publicly and privately have always taken the stand that I am 100% pro-life, no exceptions, period. As I said, there are plenty of other people to argue the exceptions. If a bill comes before me in the legislature that is pro-life, I will vote yes.
Let's go after that. The 15-week ban in Arizona, would you support that, Dave?
I think that was a great law that was passed.
Okay. And
everything helps.
Granted, it was stronger than any other steps as we have moved, and I have been a part of the most, I would say, the major part of all of the pro-life legislation that's passed in Arizona in the last 30 years to some extent. And so we felt that the step-by-step moving towards a place where the Supreme Court would have substantive capacity to overthrow Roe. And I'm grateful to be a part of that. Now let's go to this. When my daughter was very sick, I was asked to continue a drip that kept her alive. Should I just have let her keep on suffering with no opportunity to ever come out of it and let her die on her own? What do you think?
That is a very good question and a very tough question. And first of all, let me commend you for your work on the 15-week bill, because that was instrumental in helping the Supreme Court make that decision. I mean, it applied that much more pressure. And I appreciate what you've done over the years. And we have agreed on most things, almost everything on that subject over the years. To your question, I faced the same situation. Both of my parents at different times were on life support. It's a very tough decision. When my mother was on life support and my siblings were all gathered together to make that decision, I volunteered to take my father home and let my siblings make that choice. Now, perhaps that was, maybe I should have stayed, but I told them that I would support whatever they decided, and I knew what they had decided. They were going to remove the life support. And so it's a very good question, very challenging. With end of life and beginning of life, there is no doubt there are some very, very tough emotional and spiritual decisions to make. Again, whether it's, I would say that end of life, a doctor should not have the authority to end life.
I agree.
Anyone, it should be the family. And that's touchy enough. It's really, really hard. Beginning of life, again, for both end of life and beginning of life, any legislation that comes across my desk to support life in any case, I will vote for that, even if it seems to some to be extreme.
And I think we can agree that these decisions, now, I think much of the abortion question has been subsumed in a convenience question, where it was just easier. But all decisions where it came, in the cases that I felt where it might be acceptable and or at the end of life, where you take these decisions, it is extremely demanding that people give their utmost spiritual and deep thought to what they should do. That's about all I have to say.
Thank you, gentlemen. So I like this question from the audience, even though it's not really a question. Somebody wrote, "Don't tell me what you're going to do, tell me what you have already done." So with that in mind, what is your single greatest achievement in all your years at the Capitol? And let's start with Senator Farnsworth this time.
You know, that's a very thought-provoking question. And I would say that there's not one event that I would say was the most important. My most important service to the state has been the fact that I have, in 9 years, never missed a session, with the exception of 2, when I was invited to the Trump White House. And I left the legislature, flew to Washington, went to my meeting, got back on a plane and flew back, never went home. And so I am really proud of the fact that I am a very dependable individual. And beyond that, I have been very dependable in voting in a conservative manner. I mentioned earlier some of my qualifications, as I believe I have been a very dependable voter. And so not just one thing, but just the dependability, stability. You can count on David Farnsworth. I will always vote the right way. I will not be swayed by lobbyists or special interest groups.
Speaker,
I'm impressed with dependability because, Dave, I sat right next to you on the floor. And I think you did vote yes a couple of times. And it was a very dependable vote. And that's kind of your reputation, is if you don't understand it, you vote no. And I get it. But we have just passed the largest tax cut in history. We just passed a huge investment in water infrastructure to give our state assurance going forward. So a lot of these things are kind of tied, and a lot of them are very recent. It's not like the old days of growing smarter or other issues relative to pro-life. The rainy day fund, the ESA expansion we just passed, the biggest parental choice opportunity in the history of this state and probably any other. We just did that. Dave, you weren't there, but we did. And I think that those were critical and I think highly admirable that the teams that were there working with me and others got those things done.
well, and let's pull on that thread for a minute there. The state legislature passed the largest budget in state history. It was a bipartisan budget, earned a lot of support from Democrats as well as Republicans. Mr. Speaker, I think we know where you stood on that budget, but Senator Farnsworth, would you have voted for it?
You know, that's a very good question, and I will answer it. Let me say that I appreciate the fact, and I want to commend Speaker Bowers for all the good things that he talked about and accomplished. That ESA bill was an amazing accomplishment, and I commend you for all the good accomplishments you made. And by the way, I appreciated the 2 years that we sat next to each other, and I ran across this picture this morning. I don't know if you'll remember that, Rusty.
I remember that.
Caricature you drew of me. And you tapped me on the shoulder.
Higher so we can see the bottom. Okay.
And it was kind of poking fun at me, but it was good humor, and I appreciated it. I knew I had that put away somewhere. But to the budget, the budgeting, as we all know, or we all should know, is a very complex system. And I was taught way back when that you vote no on the budget very cautiously, because if you vote no because you think it's too high, which to me it's always too high, but if you withhold your vote, it'll probably go higher, which is, I believe, what happened this year. There was a group of conservative Republicans who withheld their vote, wanting things they didn't get, larger tax decrease. I'm not sure what it was. I wasn't privy to the conversations. But because they withheld their vote, then the budget got much bigger, I think $6 billion more or something like that, because, as we have said, votes were purchased from the Democrats. Now, I've seen that done for years. In the Senate, I recall we were one vote short, and they went to Bob Worsley, and he said, okay, give $10 million more for the universities and I'll vote for the budget. And so his vote was purchased for $10 million, not to Bob Worsley, but to the universities. There was another senator who was a Democrat who, Begay, said he wanted something for the reservation, $1.5 million, and there was a little humor there that he sold out awfully cheap. So in answer to your question, Hank, I would have to see the budget, and what I would have done, quite frankly, is been sitting down with those conservative Republicans and hopefully with the Speaker of the House, if we could get them together and say, hey, we need to come to an agreement here, because if Speaker Bowers has to go to the Democrats to replace your votes, it's going to get very, very expensive. So I believe all we have when we're in the legislature, we have one vote plus our reasoning ability. And well-minded conservatives can sometimes do more harm than good if they hold out for too much, because the budget has to be passed. Now, the right way is for leadership to bring people together in some way, find that middle ground and compromise. I think we lost an opportunity, and it's going to cost us a lot of money to make up that $6 billion or whatever it was that it cost to get the budget passed. And this is going to sound a little judgmental, but I think it's up to leadership to bring people together and somehow find a compromise with their own party that will work. Now, I was not there, didn't have the opportunity, but Hank, in answer to your question, I would have worked like crazy to come to an agreement to bring the people together so that we wouldn't have spent an extra $6 billion. And hopefully I would have been able to persuade those well-meaning, conservative, hardcore Republicans who were wanting good things, that perhaps they were doing more harm than good by being so hardcore. But then what I heard is that leadership was not willing to meet with them. Now, whether that's true or not, I don't know.
Well,
But
you just said it.
it's not a yes and no answer.
I was hoping for a yes or no, but I can see that it wasn't going that way.
Get one
Mr.
from me
Speaker, do
either.
you want to respond?
Oh, absolutely, I want to respond. I love the rumor mill dictum of the legislature that I heard it was $6 billion, so it must be true. Or I heard that they were well-meaning hardcore Republicans, so it must be true. The fact of the matter is, several members of my caucus advertised well ahead of time. They said, we won't vote for any budget where there's not a 30% cut in present spending and no further spending at all. Think about that, 30%, corrections, education, access, etc. And so we ran a budget up the post and it got rejected. It was just numbers, a numbers only budget. So we said, okay, we have to have water. That's going to cost a lot of money. We have to, this tax cut will cost us a lot of money. And in order to get that, what can we do and how can we convince those of another party to come on board? Amazingly, it did take work. We knew we couldn't reach some who were so dogmatically entrenched that they wouldn't work with us. They gave their dictum. They laid out the line. We said, okay, we'll go shopping. We'll go find another way. And so we found, amazingly, that we did add a lot of money, but it was all from Republicans. The rainy day fund, 400 million. The ESA expansion, 350 million. $1 billion for infrastructure and highways. The $500 million for the border. You think that the Democrats wanted the border fixed? In fact, some of them did. The largest tax cut in history, $1 billion for the water future. These things cost money. We took care of all the debt, David. We took care of all the pension debt, a lot of the state debt on the buildings. While we had money, we paid our debts. And so I think that this budget is highly defensible. We added a lot more money to K-12. Great. We've added 1.7% more than it would have cost us had we been able to just do a Republican-only budget. And I think that 1.7% to be able to reach out and create bridges with the other side instead of engaging in this inane and long-term shelling and trench warfare with each other was highly, highly profitable to the state of Arizona's future. And if we can keep that mentality that there are things we can agree on. Everybody had something, but if we can agree on some things and get a budget out and not hold each other hostage or try to extort an outcome, I think that's a good deal. And I think that showed leadership on my part, on Ben Thomas' part, on Grantham's part, on the Appropriations Chairman Gina's part, Ms. Cobb's part, on a lot of other people's part. That showed leadership and the willingness to work. And finally, on the last day of session, we got it done.
Well, and you got it done before the end of the fiscal year, right? Before the government was shut down, just barely made it. And I commend you for the good things you did. Now, if I had been a part of that group, if I had been there and they said, hey, let's roll things back, let's not spend any more money, let's give the taxpayers a tax reduction and feel little pain to not expand, I might have been right there with them if I could see it was doable. And in the 9 years I was in the budget process, I don't know that I ever asked for anything because I understand how challenging it is. To get a budget, you got to have 31 votes. And I don't know how you got there. Obviously, when it was done, you had a lot of people voting for the budget and very few that abstained from voting. But of course, we all know that behind closed doors, that's where you find the 31 and 16. And so the devil's in the details there. So it is a difficult process. And I would say again, if I were there, I would be trying to be a mediator and talking to both sides. I got along well with Democrats and Republicans, and to have a true bipartisan budget is something that everyone could celebrate if it's not too expensive, which yes, and I have not looked at the numbers myself, and yes, I heard some secondhand information, and I have not researched the numbers, but I think it was more expensive than it could have been if leadership had the skills to somehow get through to some thick skulls that are new in the process and bring them into the fold, it would have been less expensive. Now, was that possible? I don't know. Nobody knows. You can't go back and do it. But next year, certainly, I look forward to the opportunity of sitting down with those hard-headed conservatives that might be like-minded with myself to see if I could get them to compromise just a little. So again, thank you for what you accomplished. I'm not going to say it was a good budget, but I will say there was a lot of very good things in there, especially the ESA item. I think that's something we've been working on for over 25 years. We know that. So thank you for the things you did.
Speaking of the tax cuts in the budget, one tax cut, we're getting a lot of questions about gas prices. And I know there's not a whole lot that Arizona lawmakers can do to bring our gas back down to $1 or $2 per gallon. But one thing that it's always been on the table is our gas tax. Arizona adds an additional 18-cent tax on every gallon of gas to pay for road maintenance, construction, that kind of thing. A couple of years ago, we were talking about increasing that tax. Now the conversation is more about suspending that tax. Would either of you support suspending the gas tax to ease people's burden at the pump, or do you think that's short-sighted?
Which one do you want to go first?
Mr. Bowers, you spoke up first. Let's go there.
Has anybody driven on the freeways? Has anybody driven around Arizona? The 18 cents doesn't even cover our maintenance. And with all of the electric vehicles and others that don't pay that tax, it is becoming increasingly difficult to even have a it's still viable, but it's much more damaging to vehicle travel and much more, and it will continue to be much more difficult to exercise our best use of our roads if we don't pay for them. If you'll notice, the average price of gas has come down 20 cents. Hasn't locally, not much. It always shoots up like a rocket and comes down like molasses. But if Biden would just get the heck out of the way and let America get back into its energy independence, this would all be gone. And he says, oh, you got the leases, fantastic. But this is more a function of federal intervention and going off to our enemies and trying to get them to provide our gas rather than free up and loosen up our gas production capabilities than it is a thing in Arizona. So I'll keep paying my 18 cents so that I can drive on a road at all.
So, Mr. Speaker, should we increase that tax?
At some time, that should be something to be considered, but I don't think it is not right now. I think right now we're hammered. I get an amazing $24,600 a year for this job. And so we have to be careful. You know, I drive a car that's much more gas beneficial. I mean, it doesn't take as much to drive it. But everybody knows you have to be able to drive. You have to be able to communicate and to move around town and get your commerce done. And so I'm just hopeful if we did anything, what we ought to do is have a moratorium on driving. Just hold off on a Sunday, hold off on a Saturday and stay home. You want to watch the voters change? Watch what happens when the demand drops. And that's what's happening nationwide. Demand is dropping, prices are coming down.
Senator Farnsworth, is the gas tax too high, too low, just right?
Hey, all the taxes are too high. I think I'll use your terms. Taking away that tax temporarily is short-sighted because our highways and streets are in need of repair. Any tax reduction that came about, that's a permanent reduction, I would vote for. Temporary, I think, as you said, short-sighted. I got to respond to the last comment. A moratorium on driving, I trust that was a joke because, you know, to tell people they can't drive, that is socialism. However, now encouraging.
I don't believe I told people that they couldn't drive. I said, I'll exercise my own moratorium. If we use less travel, what's the price? We don't have to force that. Nobody.
Okay. I thought, sure, that's what.
Stretch it, Dave. Don't stretch it.
I didn't hear the voluntary. I agree with that. You know, driving, if we reduced our driving voluntarily, if there was a campaign encouraging people to not drive so much, that's kind of like using the carpool lane. It's just common sense. Anyway, I think what we should look at, one thing is the price of our contracts. I think there's way too much good old boy deal making, who's getting the contracts and not enough competition. I believe we could repair our roads with a lot less money if we had more competition out there, which goes into what do we do about reducing costs? One thing, always reduction in regulation. What can we do on a state level to reduce regulation, to stimulate the economy in Arizona more? What can we do to push back against the federal government? Because obviously this problem was created by the federal government, but we need to find ways as a state to push back, start saying no to federal dollars so that we can, because there's always strings attached. we need to find solutions. I wish we had oil in Arizona. If there is oil out there, we need to start drilling. And I don't know of any oil reserves, but hey, if there are any, we need to find a way to let them start drilling and rebel against the federal government, because the federal government is out of control. There's only about 20 things constitutionally they should be doing. They're doing none of them very well, and a lot of things that they shouldn't be doing. In fact, if people could compare our life today with the lives of the people under King George, we might want King George back, because we certainly live in a tyrannical system under overregulation by the federal government.
Now, Dave, if I was to say, now, did I just hear you say that you were going to mandate that King George come back rather than have a moratorium on driving? Should I quote you on that?
Okay, so speaking of regulations that, so I want to talk a little bit about water. We just pumped more than $1 billion into augmenting Arizona's water supply. It's not exactly clear what projects are going to be funded through that. But one thing that Arizona has struggled to do in recent years is to regulate the use of the water, the groundwater specifically, that we do have here in this state. Do we need more regulations on water use, either by industries or by individuals? And let's start with you, Mr. Speaker.
All right. First, water as a general topic. The $1 billion combined with the $200 million last year will give us 3 areas of good capability. One is conservation, introducing the conservation ethic more forcefully into our society. And as Mr. Abraham has pointed out, there are ways that we can do it that are even profitable. And we want to explore all of those. We need to use what water we have better, wiser, with just a change in our ethic about how we treat water. You know, kids playing with a water bottle on the street corner. You don't do that in Israel. Nobody's going to be mad. You know, it's not like illegal. It's just it costs so much money. It's like shooting gas into a bucket and giving it away. Water is very valuable, and we need to see its true value. So the conservation ethic. Then, as Gail and Ms. Kerr and others have noted, there's lots of other projects that this money will fund that help to get water into the ground. As Gail Griffin, Senator, I call her Senator, Representative Griffin, my chair in the Natural Resources, she is always talking about rain recapture, how much evaporates, that we need to get it in the ground and build up our aquifers as much as we're able. And there's a lot more that we can do. So those little projects on a grant basis, we see those all over the state being a benefit. The large project is augmenting, finding exterior supplies, whether that be the desal out of Mexico, where we could put a plant there and ship water straight up and put it in the canal, the CAP, and bring it out to the central areas of the state and beyond. But we want to buy water. It's not groundwater. It's not surface water. It is state water if we can buy it. And then we can use it to resolve some of these problems that have dogged some of the areas around the state, especially in the rural area use. Many of the aquifers, Hank, are going down. Many. And we have talked about perhaps putting on some type of a replenishment obligation, so that if you have big pumps and you're pumping a ton load of water out for crops, people say, why do you grow so much alfalfa in Arizona? Because alfalfa grows in Arizona. You don't grow it in Alaska, you know. And what about cotton? Shouldn't we grow somewhere? Yeah, you're going to grow cotton in Minnesota. We grow crops here that grow here. The lettuce in Yuma and the green vegetables, that 80% of the nation's green vegetables in the winter come from Yuma, Arizona. And so that needs water. And we eat that water. And so it's very important. All of those things are in this mix. The water mix is very critical. It takes a lot of input, and it has taken a lot of good input from experts, both in the legislature who are trying to keep ahead of the knowledge curve that we are presented by outside experts, and then all of the exercise of technology that's happening worldwide that can help us resolve these problems going into the future. So more regulation, yeah, there'll probably be some more regulation. Less regulation in some areas, great, when people show a more prudent attitude towards water. Rainwater harvesting off your own roof. Why wouldn't we do that? Why wouldn't we incentivize that in some way? That's a very valuable resource. So all kinds of thoughts, great things coming out of the universities, great things coming in from other states, lots of offers for augmentation coming into Arizona now. People are very, very interested in sending us water. And floodwaters off the Midwest, floodwaters in the North, lots of opportunities. So we're just trying to leverage that billion into big projects that will help Arizona going forward.
I heard a lot about augmentation in that, and I heard a lot about conservation in that, but I didn't hear any specifics on regulation. You know, what do we tell people about how they can use the water that we have? Do we need to stop people from using so much?
Well, why don't we get
companies?
No, I do think that there could be and may need to be regulation. It has to be thoughtful, has to be common sense regulation for conservation and use of water supplies. It's not wrong. Regulation isn't wrong. We have a stop sign. Is that regulation? Should we get rid of it? I mean, there's lots of regulation on everything. Look around your office. Look around your house, Dave. Look around my house. There is nothing in our houses that isn't regulated. Nothing, even you. And so,
do you agree? More regulation?
I'm not asking. This isn't the regulation train. If that's true, I want King George back.
Regulation, King George, and no driving on Saturdays.
There you go.
My turn to respond.
Please, sir.
All right. So I am extremely uncomfortable with the talk about regulating water. I think we've had a good lesson. I will say, I hope to high heaven I never have to vote no on a water regulation bill, or that I will see the necessity of voting yes at some point. Now, the water situation is real. Speaker Bowers has laid it out quite clearly. When I was sitting in the House of Representatives during the State of the State address, when Governor Ducey announced that he wanted to spend $1 billion on money, my ears perked up, and I have to confess that I thought, wow, that's pretty amazing, pretty interesting. I didn't feel negative about it. I felt a concern, as I do now. How will the money be spent? Now, I had looked into desalination. What Israel has done is amazing. And yes, there are other countries who have learned a lot. We need to really look into that. The problem with that, in my mind, is the border is so unstable. And the leadership of the United States and of Mexico at this point are not trustworthy enough to have an agreement there, because if we spend lots of money building a plant, and I've heard it, okay, you can build it down in Mexico, near Rocky Point, near the Gulf of California, or I've heard other people say, no, let's build it on the United States side and pump the water up. Of course, being a logical mind, pumping salt water, that is very corrosive, and it'd be extremely expensive to maintain and repair those pipelines pumping salt water. But if it's possible, I'd be more inclined to that than processing in Mexico, because things are so unstable. We might build this huge plant and then lose it. So anyway, a great idea that needs to be pursued, to use salt water, but we've got to stabilize things before we can do that. I believe in technology. We need to continually keep looking for that. First time I heard of transporting water from another state, it sounded kind of crazy to me, but I've heard it from several sources, and I've thought about it, and I said, well, we transport everything else. Maybe that is possible. there's got to be a way, because Arizona is growing, will continue to grow. We all want it to grow. We don't want to become this Gestapo government that's going to measure every drop of water. And so we must discover more. Now, the best way is for us to all repent and pray for rain, and the good Lord could send us plenty of rain. However, we can do that on an individual basis, but it's hard to get enough people to repent and pray. We can't really count on that, although we know the Lord can do it, but will the people do their part? So last comment I'll make is I believe in the mastermind concept. Again, bringing people together, sitting down at a table, and I'm not talking about just the known water experts, but to allow people from the public to come in and give their ideas, because someone might come up with a brilliant idea that no one else has thought of. So I believe in the legislature, in the next session, we need to have open meetings, open to the public, where people can come in and bring their ideas, along with the behind closed doors with the experts, because that's part of the balance also. So I am.
I'd like to comment, Dave. I'd like to comment, if I could, about your idea of making an agreement with Mexico, because it's so unstable. I seem to remember a former president making a rather large trade agreement with Mexico, and that we thought that was fantastic. And so I think, as opposed to some who may hem and haw, and maybe we should, we shouldn't, is that if we move decisively to create good relationships with our friends and our border, that there are things that we can do that are beneficial to both, and that we need to do that right away and as fast as possible. By the 17th of next month, let's see, it's July, right? So August, the 17th, there's a report due to the Department of the Interior, and of our plan to conserve 800,000 acre feet of water. If not, then we might get that shut off. So not only is this a problem, it is imminently a problem. You think you're going to do that without regulation? 800,000 acre feet. How many lawn sprinklers do you think are going to get to run into the street? How many people are going to be throwing buckets of water around? That's a lot of water, Dave. And it's going to take some very common sense approaches with government and people working together to solve this problem.
I believe that we should start by increasing awareness to exactly what you're talking about.
We've done that.
Get it out there and ask for voluntary conservation. I believe we can save a lot through voluntary methods. And as far as making a deal with Mexico, quite frankly, if we had President Trump in the White House, or some strong leader that I had confidence in, I would be willing to move forward. But quite frankly, with Sleepy Joe in the White House, I would be terrified to try to make an agreement with a foreign country, because they would not respect us. We have to have, and that it goes for leadership in Arizona, that our governor's race, our legislative, all we're talking about is very important, because it's possible for the state of Arizona to make a deal with a state of Mexico. Complicated, but yes, you're right. We've got to do something, and we've got to do it fast. But we have to have strong leadership that the people of Arizona and the people of Sonora and Mexico will respect. Then we can move forward. So, but your points are well taken.
Okay, we've covered a lot of ground, but one thing we haven't hit on yet is education. One of you will be representing the Mesa School District, the largest in the state. I want to ask if you think Arizona's K-12 public education is adequately funded. But I find that when I ask that of Republicans, they generally say yes. And the kind of nuance falls in, are our teachers adequately funded? So let me phrase it this way. Do you believe that teachers in your school district are being paid enough right now? And if not, what is the right amount? And let's start with Senator Farnsworth, please.
Great question, complex. There's no easy answer, but I'm going to start with this. One of the most frustrating things of my experience in the legislature over the 9 years I was there was that every time we sent more money to education, it didn't seem to get to the classroom. And it's very frustrating because our teachers complain that they are not paid enough. Now, are they paid enough? It all depends on what you compare it to. I have worked at some very low-paying jobs, but I'm not going to try to determine a rate that is fair. I'm not going to go there. I will say that with what was passed recently, having the dollar follow the child, I think is going to solve the problem right there. Now, the way it'll solve the problem is by creating more competition between charter schools, private schools, public schools, and competition is a wonderful thing. Things will get better. Teachers will make more money because what we have is a bottomless pit, and the bottomless pit are the superintendents. Because if you look at the budget, if we send money, where does it stop? The superintendents hire another superintendent. I went through the wages of superintendents. Hey, they're making way too much money, but more than that, there's too many of them. Mesa School District, I don't know how many superintendents and assistant superintendents they have, but we are way too staff heavy. It's become this huge money machine. And if you go try to support one of your grandkids by going to an event, look at what they charge you just to get in the door. It is amazing. And there is so much fraud and corruption. You go in there and try to buy a bag of popcorn, and there's someone there just raking in the dough and throwing it in a box. Yeah, the school is supposed to get some of that. Who's monitoring that? So what I'm saying simply is there is so much waste. I think that the schools, yes, typical Republican response, the schools are receiving enough. If we cut down on the waste and the fraud and the heavy overhead of, I'll pick on the superintendents, too many superintendents, too much staff. The teachers could get a raise tomorrow if we just reduced the waste and fraud.
But Senator, let me ask one more time. What is an appropriate amount to pay a, let's say, starting teacher, a brand new teacher? Should they be making $40,000 a year, $50,000 a year, $70,000 a year? What do you feel would be sufficient to keep them high quality teachers teaching in Arizona?
I don't think we mandate charter schools and private schools how much they pay their teachers. I think the market takes care of that, and that's what I believe in, the free market. If all our teachers leave Arizona and go somewhere else, that we're going to know that they're not getting enough money. How much is that? The market decides that. And it's a problem because, yes, if California, the Socialist Republic of California is overpaying their teachers because they just tax their citizens to death, then Arizona teachers will go over there. You cannot, it's just like minimum wage. I don't support the minimum wage. It's a bad idea. And when they raise the minimum wage, it just increases costs to everybody. It doesn't solve anything. I believe in the free market, and we just have to, again, there's plenty of money out there. The market will determine how much to pay them. And if public school teachers aren't making enough and they don't have any teachers, then all the kids, I guess, are going to go to private and charter schools if there's teachers over there. Somehow they know how to do it and make a profit. So,
Mr. Speaker, how much should we pay our teachers to keep them here?
I need to back up to the fraud and corruption in the Glee Club, Booster Club popcorn sales. That I'm thinking maybe we should get King George to get a group to regulate popcorn sales at Red Mountain High School to solve the teacher shortage by putting the money into the classroom.
Wow.
I'm not talking
Statement.
about
I'm totally,
regulation. I'm talking about some appropriate auditing. That's what I was.
auditing is a great word. We got to audit more. I'm thinking that one thing is I don't sit on the school board in Mesa, but all of us as citizens, I put 7 of my children and now grandchildren going through Mesa Public Schools, and Dave probably likewise. I don't sit on that school board, but they're the ones that by law have kind of the final distribution say. There is a base level funding that we've increased substantially. And if you say, oh, we're 45th in the nation, look at the difference in pennies between some of those states. It's a very tight group. And then it gets really big. Go to New York, go to Washington, big cost of living, big cost of teachers. And so I am not qualified to say the demand in Apache Junction versus Chandler. I know that there's a huge difference in what they pay their beginning teachers. And so I would hope that our school boards would be held to account. We have an equalization formula that equalizes the funding per student going out through the Department of Education and to our schools. And it's not up to the legislature. We have tried and tried and tried to force the money into the classroom. I think we ought to turn it all on its head. I think the teachers ought to get paid first. Pick a wage, good wage. Then go up to the teachers' aides who are helping, with all the keeping the plant, the school plant together, and then move up to the support staff, and then move up to the principal, and move up to the supervisors, and then move up to the superintendent. And if there's any left, he gets it,
I like that idea. I'll vote for that.
Both of my parents were teachers. We've lived humbly, but wisely. We had summer jobs to help augment our income. All of the kids participated with our father in working to keep the family. Teaching was good to my family. They didn't make a lot of money. I think my dad's beginning salary was $2,400 when we lived in Scottsdale. And so it has always been a challenge to show the appreciation of teachers, but to think that teachers are somehow the enemy, I don't think so. And of my students that I taught while I was at EVIT, of my children who teach, of my brothers and sisters who taught, and my parents who taught, everybody would like more. And I think that there is some equalizing that happens. When your school is a great school, people want to bring your kids there, you get more money. But that's for a school board to really hold their feet to the fire and make sure that they're paying the teachers sufficient.
And I asked this question. Sorry, Senator, go ahead.
Hank, I would like to add one more thing before we leave education. 2 possible solutions I think we ought to try, and it's been talked about. One is performance-based, where the teachers are not tenured, but the pay increases and their job depends on their performance. Now, that's not simple to do, but I think a necessary element. And also, I think the key thing that could make a huge difference is, again, with regulation, we reduce the requirements for someone to teach in Arizona. Make the requirements less. Now, to balance that out, I say you'd have to have a performance-based. A teacher would have to be evaluated very carefully in this tenure where it's really, really difficult to get rid of a bad teacher. That needs to be eliminated. But I think if we opened it up to free market where more people could become teachers, then I think we could have a larger crop of teachers. Now, naturally, that would have a tendency to bring the pay down as there's more competition. But hey, that's the free market that Republicans profess to believe in. So reduction of requirement and performance base. There's a couple ideas I'll throw out that.
Well,
Arizona does some
wait a minute, hold
both of those things.
hold it.
Mr. Speaker.
There are many schools right now that have a performance element in their teacher pay. They have committees. We had one at EVIT. There are other schools that have their committee that review performance of teachers. And the career ladder element in its day, it's gotten a little stagnant. So performance is an option, and for the school site councils, et cetera, to exercise. And so that's something that we already did. Plus, we gave districts the ability to train and teach and set the standards to bringing teachers on. And that's, they can either go to ASU and have some type of a collegiate training there, or they can come up with their own. I think there's options right now that are being explored to enhance the numbers of teachers that are adequately qualified, but we also want them to really love teaching and serve the kids. All of that makes a great teacher, and there are a lot of people that we need to get into the schools. So this is a big problem, and I'm willing to take it on.
Why don't we allow teachers to teach with an AA degree? I believe charter schools already do. That would open it up. Anyway,
Yeah.
We can talk more about that next year.
Okay, I got one more hardball question for each of you before we move on to closing comments.
Okay.
Mr. Speaker, this year you sponsored House Bill 2802 alongside a Democrat. The bill would have provided protections to LGBTQ people when it comes to housing and employment, and would have banned health professionals from practicing conversion therapy. The bill never got a hearing after blowback from within your caucus. And
Yes, it did. You got a hearing.
Okay, I stand corrected.
We had a hearing on the bill.
Okay. Oh, the bill never got a vote in that committee. It was
That's
a
correct.
hearing, but it was an informational hearing only, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Well, then that's not really a hearing.
Oh, I totally disagree with you. That was 4 hours of a very good hearing.
The bill never got a vote, let's say. So my question is, why did you sponsor the bill considering the opposition from so many Republicans? And then two-parter, why did you not use your position as speaker to ensure it actually got a vote? You can move it to a friendly committee if you want.
I could have. The point of the discussion was not at that time a vote. I was asked by a group of interested parties, church groups, LGBTQ groups, if they could at least just have a civil discussion on these issues. A civil discussion. I said, absolutely, we can do that. And so I got people who I feel are civil and can entertain a difficult subject, and we held that. I believe in fairness for all and religious freedom. And both of those were very key elements where they were trying to find the balance between fairness for everybody's rights in the public square and our opportunity to worship and practice our religious preferences without having any government interference. Those were two big drivers to the discussion. The discussion about professional therapists, et cetera, we found in that hearing, talking with my colleague, Mr. Chavez, that the wording that was presented to us was not adequate for the challenge. We felt that it should be jettisoned, and that if there is an effort in the future, that it should be directed at employment and housing, et cetera, but not to have a prohibition on free speech. If I felt that I wanted to I maybe have same-sex attractions, if I felt I needed a therapist, why wouldn't I be able to go and ask? Is there anything that I can do, any practice that I can entertain to address this feeling that I have that is legitimate in me? Can I ask that at least? Well, the bill would have prohibited it. So we felt that that was antithetical to the whole idea of religious freedom and fairness for all. And I believe in that. I don't think religious people have any overriding right to control the public square. Everybody's in the square. Everybody has a right to talk. Everybody has a right to exercise their conscience. And that's what I thought the overriding reason was, that we should have a civil discussion. which we had equal people participating, both pro and con, lots of good discussion, lots of very emotional testimony. It was in my view, it was a very sweet discussion of a very sensitive topic for people that we have to extend consideration to as children of our Father in heaven. All of us fall short in so many ways. We have so little time to judge each other, that everybody treated fairly, but also to exercise our religion according to the dictates of our conscience.
Let's leave out the conversion therapy part of the bill and just talk about the employment and housing protections. Many people in Arizona still do not enjoy those kinds of protections unless you live in one of the big progressive cities, Phoenix, Flagstaff, Tempe, that have enacted city-wide protections. Will you bring this bill back next year, minus the conversion therapy?
I want to make sure that we work that all out. I don't want it to be so tied together and so dogmatic, but I do think we need to do something. There are bills nationally that have passed the House, the Equality Act, that I'm very concerned with, because they're so harsh on any expressions, free expressions of conscience to the contrary to the bill. And so I do think we need to have these discussions more, and I want them to be civil, and I hope that we can move forward.
So was that you intend to bring some legislation back?
I have no qualms at all about bringing something that's better worded, more restrictive in the breadth of the question, and entertain and promote these discussions further. And
Senator Farnsworth, would you have any thoughts on this?
I definitely do. I appreciate that. As Christians, the Lord Jesus Christ taught us to love everyone and treat everyone with respect. And I support that completely. However, as I mentioned earlier, I support traditional families. A man and a woman, we know that children have a better chance of growing up properly in our society if there's a father and a mother in the home. Not always possible. There's single parents that work their hearts out trying to give their children a good opportunity. And now we have a problem with confusion among children. And I think you wanted to limit it to the protected status subject. And that is what is most alarming to me, because I am definitely opposed to making it a protected status. Now, our civil rights movement is something that needed to happen. Okay, if a person is rejected because of the color of their skin, like we know in the past, they weren't allowed to drink out of the same drinking fountain, had to ride in the back of the bus. That was obviously wrong and is wrong today. And I think that we've made great progress. I think that we have come together. As far as protecting a status of something that someone chooses. Now, we know that human beings, some of them have inclinations toward homosexuality, but that doesn't make it right. And as a society, we need to stand against that and teach children and not allow them to be taught in the schools that they need to decide whether they're a boy or a girl. It's absurd. And yes, we need to provide counseling for those who have those inclinations. But heck, in the Old Testament, homosexuals were taken out and stoned. And I'm not saying that we should do that, obviously, but we have, as a society, we've come a long ways. We know what happened to Sodom and Gomorrah in the Bible. And if we are okay with these things, if we pretend to be okay with these, if we sit around and talk and say, oh, it's all right if you have these feelings, it's not right. It is in opposition to God's laws. Now, we're not going to turn against people because they make choices, just like if someone decides to commit adultery, we're not going to hate them or despise them. We're going to love them and try to recover them. But someone who has these inclinations, and every family has someone in their family that has these inclinations. I mean, extended families. I'm not saying that it's not a real problem, because we all know in our extended family someone that has these challenges. But as a society, we are destroying our children because we don't take a stand and teach them that you have two sexes. You have a male and you have a female, and you're born that way. And if you don't understand that, some loving person needs to sit you down and help you work through it. Like Speaker Bowers suggested, counseling. That's a very, very important part of it. But to give them protected status because of a lifestyle choice, that is not civil rights. That's a lifestyle choice, and we're trying to extend them protection because of a choice. No, I will not accept that, and I will stand against it.
But can I speak about a bit more? I'm not going to have a condescending attitude about anybody who thinks about, as an adult, how they act, what they choose. Everybody has a conscience, and it was given by God. How we exercise that conscience is between me and him. As long as I don't hurt your rights and don't make life more difficult for any other person, this is, in my view, a topic of great sensitivity, and it takes an immense amount of love and concern for our fellow beings and fellow friends. We all need each other. There aren't the best who stand on this right side of the room and those who have some diminishing problem to their value on the other side of the room. We have to consider that everybody has a conscience. And for someone to take that quote and extend it into the classroom, that somebody has to promote drag queen X, that's not what I'm talking about at all. I'm talking about where people make decisions and want to live according to the dictates of their own conscience and allow everybody else the same privilege. I think that's what I want to be as a heritage of my service, whether it's next term or in 10 terms, that I want to teach and act in a way that is like the religion that I feel in my heart, that I've studied throughout my life, and that the exemplar of all of my focus lives. He loved everybody. And if I have to live with the Samaritans and hang out with the Samaritans while the priest and the Levite go on the other side of the road, I'm happy to do it, and I just hope I'm a good one.
You know, I realize that I have been bold in my statements, and I am sure that I offended some people out there. But I will repeat, this has been in the courts, in the news for years. We're talking about I am talking about protected status. If a business wants to refuse doing business with someone, they should be allowed to do it. The cake baker was in the news and so forth. I stand on the side of businesses that they should be able to refuse service to someone who they are uncomfortable with working with. In other words, those cake bakers, we all know, I understand they were regular customers, and it was only the same-sex marriage that the baker objected to making that cake, because they were not comfortable because it went against their religious beliefs. So what I am saying, all these people need to be loved. And yes, it is a very sensitive subject, and we need to express great love and understanding to them, but we should not make a law giving them protected status or forcing a business to do business with someone they're not comfortable with.
All right. Senator Farnsworth, you've argued that and I think you referenced this earlier today, that the Department of Child Safety has kidnapped children and sold them into sexual slavery. You've even gone so far as to call the police on a colleague, a fellow senator, because you believe she was threatening you because of your investigation into the matter. The idea that officials are selling children into sexual slavery is a core belief of the QAnon movement. My question to you is, are you a follower of Q, and do you still believe that DCS is trafficking children?
I am not a follower of anyone except the Lord Jesus Christ. I don't know anything about this group except I have read some things online, and some of the things they've said made sense to me. And a reporter called me one time, and I honestly said, well, some of the things they say make sense. I don't know who they are. I don't think anyone does, thus the name. But no, I don't follow them. As far as DCS, the way you portrayed it is a little bit of an exaggeration, quite a bit of an exaggeration, in that
What you do
I never said that DCS was selling children into sex trafficking. Okay? What I have said is that DCS is losing 400 children a year approximately, and I have said they are probably, some of them are probably ending up in sex trafficking. For example, I've talked to the director of DCS, and he explained the problem to me in that, you know, years ago, we had lots of juvenile correction facilities. I know because I was a juvenile correction officer for a period of time, and they had cells. It was very secure. When a juvenile was put in this situation, they were behind bars. It was just like a jail. So they were secure. On the other hand, they've shut down this system. We have very few juvenile correction systems anymore. I don't know who made that choice, but the director of DCS said it's a problem because these juvenile delinquents, I'll use that phrase, are given to DCS, and we don't have any place to put them. So we put them in a group home, and the sexual predators come out off the street and recruit them. So for instance, a young lady who has been previously recruited will come into a group home, befriend a young lady and tell them how wonderful their life is, because I'm told it's kind of like an Amway business. You get credit for how many people you can recruit. And that's the way these people are taking these young women and men perhaps are taken out of these group homes and lured into sex trafficking. Now, there may be some people in DCS that are aware of this. I think it would be a horrible thought to think someone is turning a blind eye. But if you're going to lose 400 children a year, they are not taking it seriously enough. Their budget is over $1 billion. Now, to Senator Kate Brophy-McGee, I was holding the missing children meetings once a month, I believe, or maybe it was every 2 weeks, I don't recall. She was disturbed by that and went to President Fan and asked her to have me stop. Okay. I asked to see Senator Brophy-McGee. I thought we could have a good conversation about it because she obviously was concerned with DCS, as was I. She, I believe, was more supportive of the agency. I was more critical of the agency, but I thought we should talk. So I came into her office with an appointment, and the leaders of the Senate were there. The young lady who's chief of staff right now, Melissa Taylor, was in the room, and another individual. And we had this conversation. I was trying to have a conversation, and she said, well, you need to stop holding those meetings or my husband is going to take care of it. And I asked her, I said, Kate, what do you mean by that? And she said, this meeting is over. And so I went home, I thought about it. I said, what did she mean by that? My husband will take care of it. I mean, it sounded like a threat. I asked her, is that a threat? What are you saying? She refused to answer. Well, at any rate, so I talked to law enforcement. I talked to my assistant. I talked to the DPS agent of the building. What should I do? It was recommended that I report it, which I did. And you know the rest, it was in the newspaper. They interviewed me, they interviewed her. To this day, I don't know whether she intended that as a threat or not, but why was she so concerned about me holding meetings? I don't know. So I seriously thought she might be threatening me. And so I thought it appropriate to report that.
And let me ask you, sir, do you think that government officials are complicit with the, as you say, children who are leaving the DCS system and going into being sexually trafficked? I just want to clarify that point.
I would hate to think that anyone working for DCS was complicit with sex trafficking. I don't want to even think that. That is a horrible thought. I do think they are guilty and that they are losing children. And I believe that DCS is doing more harm than good because they don't know how many children they have. They don't know how many they're losing. And we tried to pass a bill just to get them to give a little more information. And I tell you, I didn't believe that the first time I heard it. And so I went across the street to Ledge Council. I said, this gentleman is telling me that DCS is losing 400 children a year. That can't be true. They did research and came back to me and said, it is true. You combine, and all you have to do is go to their own website. That's all I've done is go to their website and look at their numbers. You scroll down, it's an Excel spreadsheet. You scroll down to about line 234, something like that. It says missing children, abducted and absconded children. You total the number, runaways, absconded, lost. It totals approximately 400 a year. Where are they going? And it's not just Arizona. We have an epidemic of children being lost into sex trafficking across the nation, not just Arizona. And I don't know how it's happening, but I know from their own numbers, and I suggest that everyone listening go to azdcs.gov, go to their report, their monthly report, and look at that line where it says lost and absconded children. How can they lose children? I called the department, I called and asked how many cars had been lost in the last year. You know what they told me? 0. So I guess cars are more important than children because we are losing 400 children a year. And I challenge anyone to look at the numbers and correct me, because I hope to high heaven that I am wrong, because I'm simply taking these numbers from DCS's own website, running them through Ledge Council, and I have documentation from Ledge Council confirming that fact. And I was amazed as I got up in the Senate and talked about it, crickets. Nobody seemed to care. I know they must have cared. Why I didn't get much support, I don't know, but I stand by what I've said. No accusation of the department that they're selling children. I like I say, I hope and pray that that isn't happening. What I do accuse them of is losing children. That's inappropriate. And if you lose 400 children a year, as an agency, you're doing more harm than good, and money won't solve it, because we are giving them over $1 billion a year. When we took them out from under DCS or DES and made them their own agency, I believe, and gave them lots more money, we made it worse. You remember a few years ago, they were talking about, we've got so many open cases and we've got to have these. Well, I think that was a mistake, because when these young folks that are right out of college go into someone's home to judge those parents, whether they're good parents or not, I think a lot of mistakes are being made. And they push so hard to reduce the number of open cases that too many children were taken away. 80%, 20%, and I'll end with this. Okay, Hank, I know you're getting nervous. Time goes on. We've been on a long time, but 20% are removed because of abuse. According to their own statistics, 80% because of neglect. And I just asked the viewers listening together today, what is the definition of neglect? Now, if a parent is abusing their children, they need to go to prison. But what is the definition of neglect? And should 80% be taken out because of neglect? Neglect is terrible, but DCS is guilty of neglect, losing 400 children a year. Thank you for hearing me out.
You two gentlemen have been excellent sports. Let's move on to the closing comments. And since I gave Speaker Bowers the first word, let's give Senator Farnsworth the last word. So, Mr. Bowers, your closing comments, please.
There's a clear contrast between myself and Dave. We are both conservative, but one of us gets things done. And I have a long history of working with teams of people to do important legislation, to handle very difficult problems. And I stand on that record. We have done the lowest amount of taxes by dropping the flat tax rate to 2.55, and it'll trigger downward. We've balanced the state budget while lowering those taxes. The massive investment in our future of our state for water, the endorsement of almost every major safety organization in the state for the work that I did on the Major Incident Bureau and other things. Massive amounts of money put into the education system, pulling up the ESAs and making them available to every family across the state to find the school that's best for their children and to fund it. To my personal investments in time and energy over all these years to try to make Arizona a better place. We have so much that we have done. I'm so proud of the people with whom I've worked. You don't do anything alone in the legislature. It takes someone who is willing to work with teams of people, put together the expertise, address the challenge, formulate a solution, follow the solution forward, change it, augment it, make alterations to make it more successful. That is my history. That's what I've done, and I've done it with honor and respect. I am a conservative. I have conservative values, and I want to move forward serving this state in that capacity in the Senate, and I will do it, and I will keep my pledge both to the people and to the Constitution of the state of Arizona and to the United States of America, which I have proven and which I will do. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Senator Farnsworth, your closing comments.
Thank you. When I started, I talked about election integrity. The reason I am in this race is because there are a lot of people out there dissatisfied with what Speaker Bowers has accomplished having to do with election integrity. I believe that people across this nation look at Arizona as a failure in that area because they believe the election was stolen. Now, I acknowledge and appreciate a lot of the accomplishments that Speaker Bowers has made over the years. However, I will say again, if we don't have an election integrity, we have nothing. We don't have a nation if we don't have elections that really work. We don't have a nation if we don't have borders that are secure, and we will not have borders that are secure. We will have to suffer with $6 a gallon gas and $3 a dozen eggs because we have an illegitimate president in the White House. And it will happen again and again. We're like a third world country because our elections have been stolen, and we need to tighten it up. We can't fix it overnight, and a lot has been done, but more needs to be done. So again, I think the real difference and what this election is all about is election integrity. And that's where the people have come and asked me to run because they don't feel like Speaker Bowers fulfilled his responsibility in doing everything he could to restore integrity to our elections. And if in fact he believes that they are perfect, then to somehow instill confidence in the people. And I know he knows they're not perfect. There's imperfections. It's the big difference in our opinion is how much fraud there was in the 2020 election. And we must restore the confidence in our elections. And that will take a lot of hard work, a lot of meetings, a lot of, and I hope that Warren Peterson becomes our Senate president next year, and that he will allow me as chairman to hold many, many hearings as chairman of government or some other committee concerning election integrity. That is the distinction that there is between Speaker Bowers and myself. I believe that we must restore the confidence of the voters, and that takes action and change more than has been done in the past. Thank you very much.
Thank you, gentlemen. That's it. To our candidates, we thank you so much for participating. To the voters, thanks to all of you who took the time to watch the debate and inform yourselves ahead of the August 2nd primary election. As a reminder, early voting has already begun. All registered voters, including independents, can participate in the primary. If you're an independent, you get to choose which primary you want to participate in. We encourage you to visit cleanelections.azcleanelections.gov for official, accurate voting information. Once again, thank you, candidates, so much, and have a good evening.